Hey there. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that's been generating a lot of buzz and
Yeah,
a lot of concern. Project 2025.
definitely.
We're going to be exploring this, detailed policy roadmap
Right.
that's been crafted by a coalition of conservative think tanks.
Hmm.
And it's a plan that could drastically reshape the U.S. government if a Republican president
Yeah,
wins in 2024.
absolutely.
Our primary source for this exploration is going to be a thought-provoking MSNBC interview
Okay,
with Janai Nelson,
I see.
the president and director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
pretty big deal. Uh,
It's fascinating how Project 2025 goes beyond just like aiming for victory in the 2024 election
right.
and actually provides like a meticulously detailed plan for what they're going to do
Yeah.
immediately upon assuming office.
Mhm.
It's essentially a blueprint for like a swift and comprehensive transformation of the federal government.
Right. It's like they're saying, here's exactly what we're going to do
Yeah.
starting on day one.
Day one, this is it.
And Janai Nelson really digs into like why this is causing so
Right.
much anxiety, particularly within Black communities.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be focusing exclusively on her insights from that MSNBC interview
Okay.
to kind of understand these concerns. And we really want to make it clear
Yeah.
that we're not going to be adding any interpretations or opinions of our own.
Right, so just sticking to the source material and letting Janai Nelson's perspective really guide our exploration here.
Okay, so let's jump right in.
Okay.
Nelson and the MSNBC interviewer start by discussing Donald Trump's history
Mm,
with Black communities.
okay.
They specifically reference that full-page ad that
Yeah.
he placed in the New York Times back in 1989,
Wow.
calling for the death penalty for the Central Park Five.
Right.
They both highlight how this history makes it highly unlikely that Black men will vote for him.
That historical context is crucial for understanding the deep-seated mistrust
Right.
and apprehension towards Trump
Right.
within those communities.
Absolutely. Now, Nelson and the MSNBC segment both point out some pretty alarming elements within Project 2025.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For instance, it proposes the elimination of safeguards that protect Black workers,
Mm-hmm.
potentially leading to a regression in workplace equality.
I see.
They also express concerns about potential manipulation of the census
Wow.
to diminish the political influence of Black communities,
Right.
essentially reducing their representation and access to resources.
That potential manipulation of the census is particularly concerning
Yeah.
because it strikes at the heart of fair representation
Yeah.
and resource allocation.
Totally.
By potentially undercounting Black communities, their political power would be weakened,
Mm-hmm.
and the distribution of essential resources could be skewed, further exacerbating those existing inequalities.
It's almost like they're trying to silence a significant portion of the population. And that's not all.
Oh, gosh.
They also discuss how Project 2025 aims to increase the use of legal policies that disproportionately impact Black people,
Okay.
with the death penalty being a prime example.
Yeah, that focus on policies with a disproportionate impact
Yeah.
raises serious questions about the potential for systemic bias within the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
It suggests a shift towards a legal landscape that could further marginalize
Right.
and disadvantage Black communities.
And on top of that, they bring up potential threats to affordable housing
Yes.
for Black families and, perhaps most alarmingly, the reproductive rights of Black individuals.
The implications for housing and reproductive rights are particularly worrisome
Yeah.
because they directly impact the well-being and autonomy of Black individuals and families.
Yeah.
It raises this like specter of a future where access to basic necessities and those fundamental rights could be severely restricted.
Exactly. And when the MSNBC interviewer suggests that some of these fears might be exaggerated, Janai Nelson pushes back hard. She doesn't hold back, calling Project 2025 a disastrous manifesto,
Okay.
a threat to democracy, and a specific threat to Black people.
Her strong language really reflects the gravity of the situation
Yeah.
as she perceives it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a clear signal that she believes that these threats are not hypothetical,
Right.
but rather imminent and potentially devastating.
Right. She also gets into how Project 2025 is all about shifting power to the executive branch and weakening those checks and balances that are designed to prevent any one person or branch from having too much power.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
She argues that Project 2025 aims to achieve this by placing strategically individuals in key positions
Okay.
who align with its objectives, individuals ready to dismantle existing structures and reshape the government according to this conservative vision.
Wow.
It's a very calculated and systematic approach
Right.
to wielding power.
That's a crucial point because it speaks to a deliberate strategy to concentrate power and potentially undermine the system of checks and balances.
Right.
That's so fundamental to American democracy.
Yeah.
By stacking key positions with individuals who share their ideology,
Right.
the architects of Project 2025 could exert significant influence over government operations and policy decisions.
And that concentration of power, as she points out, could lead to a situation where one person essentially becomes a dictator.
That concern about concentrated power and the erosion of democratic norms echoes warnings from historians and political scientists who study authoritarian regimes.
Right.
It highlights the importance of safeguarding those institutions and processes that ensure accountability and prevent the abuse of power.
It's a chilling thought, for sure.
Yeah.
Nelson also expresses concern about the implications of Project 2025 for data collection.
Okay.
She argues that it could restrict the government's ability to gather data about racial discrimination,
Right.
making it much harder to prove and combat systemic inequalities.
That's a really important point because it highlights the potential for Project 2025 to create a situation where discrimination becomes even more difficult to identify and address.
Yeah.
Without robust data collection,
Right.
it becomes harder to hold institutions accountable and advocate for meaningful policy changes.
It's like they're trying to create a reality where discrimination exists,
Yeah.
but can't be measured or challenged.
Precisely.
Right.
It raises concerns about transparency and the ability to, effectively address these systemic issues.
And this is where things get even more thought-provoking.
Oh, okay.
The MSNBC interviewer brings up the idea that for many Black Americans,
Yeah.
the kind of dystopia some people fear under Project 2025 is already their lived reality.
That observation highlights the stark contrast between the experiences of different communities in America.
Right.
What might seem like a hypothetical threat to some
Yeah.
is unfortunately the daily struggle for others.
It's a sobering reminder of the existing inequalities that many Black Americans face.
Yeah.
And how Project 2025 could further exacerbate those
God.
challenges.
Exactly.
And to be clear, Janai Nelson doesn't disagree with that assessment.
Right.
She acknowledges the existing challenges,
Yeah.
but argues that Project 2025 would make things exponentially worse.
Right.
She even compares it to a loaded weapon waiting to be picked up and used.
That analogy really drives home the potential for harm
Yeah.
if these plans are enacted.
Oh.
It paints a very stark picture of the risks involved and the potential consequences for vulnerable communities.
Speaking of potential harm, the interview also delves into the anxiety surrounding reproductive rights,
Right.
particularly given the existing health inequities that Black women already face.
It's crucial to understand this issue within the context of a healthcare system
Yeah.
that already exhibits significant disparities.
Right.
A system where access to quality care and resources is often unequal.
Right. And the interview specifically highlights concerns about menstrual and abortion surveillance.
That element of surveillance raises serious concerns about privacy and bodily autonomy, particularly for Black women who already experience heightened scrutiny and control over their reproductive choices.
Right.
It adds another layer of complexity and anxiety to an already sensitive issue.
And it's against this backdrop that Janai Nelson shares this startling statistic.
Okay.
Black pregnant women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth
Wow.
than the rest of the population.
That statistic is a tragic illustration of the systemic inequalities within healthcare.
Yeah.
It underscores the urgent need for policies and practices that prioritize the health and well-being of Black mothers and address the underlying factors that contribute to these disparities.
It's heartbreaking, and it makes the potential impact of Project 2025 on reproductive rights even more concerning.
Yeah.
Nelson points out that 57% of reproductive age women in the U.S., which is about 6.7 million Black women,
Wow.
live in states that either already have abortion bans or are likely to enact them soon.
That's a significant portion of the population facing restricted access to reproductive health care.
Yeah.
It's a stark reality that highlights the potential consequences of policies that limit reproductive rights.
And Project 2025 could make things even worse by potentially limiting travel for abortions
Right.
and possibly reviving the Comstock Act of 1873.
The Comstock Act, a law from the 19th century, was designed to prohibit the distribution of materials considered obscene through the mail,
Really?
including information about contraception and abortion.
Wow.
The idea of reviving this, archaic law to restrict access to abortion pills in the 21st century
Right.
is deeply concerning to many.
It feels like a step backward,
Yeah.
an attempt to roll back reproductive rights
Right.
to a time when women had far fewer freedoms and options.
It raises concerns about the potential erosion of reproductive rights
Yeah.
and the use of outdated legislation to curtail access to essential healthcare services.
Towards the end of the interview, the MSNBC interviewer raises a critical question about the lack of a long-term strategy from the left to counter movements like Project 2025.
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
There's often a critique that progressive movements lack the kind of long-term strategic thinking and organization that conservative movements have demonstrated.
It's like the right is playing chess while the left is playing checkers.
Right.
But Janai Nelson doesn't dwell on that critique.
Okay.
Instead, she issues a powerful call to action.
She emphasizes the need for constant vigilance and strategic planning, regardless of the outcome of the 2024 election, Project 2025, with its meticulously crafted plans and long-term vision, represents a significant and ongoing challenge.
She's basically saying, don't get complacent, folks.
Yeah.
This fight is far from over.
Exactly.
Right.
She stresses that this is not just about one election cycle. It's
Yeah.
about defending the fundamental principles of democracy and actively shaping the future direction of the country.
It really underscores the importance of being actively engaged.
Right.
Not just reacting, but proactively working towards a more just and equitable society.
And that brings us to Janai Nelson's closing remarks, where she delivers this powerful message about the potential unraveling of the American democratic project as we know it.
Yeah.
She stresses the absolute necessity of fighting for a truly multiracial democracy
Yeah.
that upholds the rights and freedoms of all citizens.
It's a sobering thought, the idea that our democracy could be at risk.
Right.
But it's also a call to action, a reminder that we can't take our freedoms for granted.
It highlights the fragility of democratic institutions and the constant need for vigilance and active participation to protect and strengthen them.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive
Yeah.
into Project 2025.
It has.
Thank you for joining us
Thanks for having me.
on this journey through some complex and, frankly, concerning ideas.
Yeah, it's important to stay informed and engaged, especially when it comes to issues with such profound implications for our society.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, everything we've discussed today is based solely on that MSNBC interview with Janai Nelson. We encourage you to seek it out and listen for yourself.
Absolutely.
It's definitely worth a listen.
It's a thought-provoking interview that raises those important questions about the direction of our country and the values that we prioritize.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
If Project 2025 represents one vision for the future of the United States,
Yeah.
what alternative visions do we want to explore?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of future do we want to build together?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the future is not predetermined.
Right.
It's something that we actively shape through our choices and our actions.
So let's keep the conversation going. Let's engage in thoughtful dialogue, consider diverse perspectives, and work towards creating a future that reflects our shared values of justice, equality, and opportunity for all.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.
It's a chilling thought for sure. Nelson also expresses concern about the implications of Project 2025 for data collection.
Okay.
She argues that it could restrict the government's ability to gather data about racial discrimination,
Right.
making it much harder to prove and combat systemic inequalities.
That's a really important point because it highlights the potential for Project 2025 to create a situation where discrimination becomes even more difficult to identify and address.
Yeah.
Without robust data collection, it becomes harder to hold institutions accountable and advocate for meaningful policy changes.
That's like they're trying to create a reality where discrimination exists but can't be measured
Yeah.
or challenged.
Precisely. It raises concerns about transparency and the ability to, effectively address these systemic issues.
And this is where things get even more thought-provoking.
Oh, okay.
The MSNBC interviewer brings up the idea that for many Black Americans,
Yeah.
the kind of dystopia some people fear under Project 2025 is already their lived reality.
That observation highlights the stark contrast between the experiences of different communities in America. What might seem like a hypothetical threat to some is unfortunately the daily struggle for others.
It's a sobering reminder of the existing inequalities that many Black Americans face and how Project 2025 could further exacerbate those challenges.
Right, exactly.
And to be clear, Janai Nelson doesn't disagree with